I'd like to welcome you to the 5,543rd meeting of the Rotary Club of Chicago. Rotary One is now in session, and we're going to get us started off here today with our good and old friend, Evan Freund, for the thought of the day. Evan, the floor is yours.
Hi, I'm going to present a challenge today. There are 37 treaties that the United States has signed and proposed to the Senate for ratification that the Senate has sat on, some as long as 70 years. So the U.S. is avoiding these international commitments, among other things, 3 conventions dealing with labor standards, Convention eliminating discrimination against women, Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the Armed Trades Treaty, and the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. However, there's another one that hasn't even been submitted to the Senate. It's the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which was signed by the United States in 1995, but has never been submitted to the Senate for ratification. One of the problems was that some of the states in the U.S. executed minors or provided that they can do that. That barrier was eliminated in 2005 and 2012 by the Supreme Court when they outlawed the execution of minors and even life imprisonment of minors for crimes. So the challenge is, isn't it time to rejoin the world, law and order?
Thank you very much, Evan, for always making us think a little bit more deeply and sharing some information of which I certainly was not aware. So thank you very much, Evan, for that. Moving on to the next piece of the agenda, the governance of our club and any organization is obviously a very important piece of the organization. And we committed through our strategic planning process to be as transparent as possible with how we go about governing the organization and how the nominating process works. And I think we've been fairly effective in making sure that information has been shared over the last few months through the Gyrator newsletter, as well as through Marshall's announcements over the weeks. And so with that, I want to hand the floor over to Marshall to give us an update from the nominating committee. Marshall, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Eric. As many of you know, the one task of the immediate past president is to chair the nominations committee, which is an extremely critical task in creating continuity for the club and ensuring its future success. This year I had 4 wonderful members of the committee to help me: Mark Smith, Kay Fleischer, Betsy Meisenheimer, and Ellen Harris. We've met over the last month or so, and we had many extremely qualified candidates for each of the positions that we needed to slate. And I think that's a testimony to the future of this club, how many good candidates there are. But we did need to narrow down that field to pick 4 directors who will serve between 2021 and 2023. We had to slate a treasurer, a secretary, and the president nominee who will serve as president of the club in the 2023 to 24 year. I'm here to announce, pursuant to the bylaws, that we have slated the following 4 people to be directors beginning in July of 2021. Sarah Buck and Betsy Meisenheimer, who will be serving their 2nd terms on the board. Ted Nebel and Neetha Nagubadi. As treasurer, we recommend Matthias Amberg to continue as treasurer of the club. And the secretary will be a new member to the board, Ginta Rubin. Under the bylaws, at least 21 days before the annual meeting, which is scheduled for December 15th. Additional nominations can be submitted. If no additional nominations are submitted, then the slate that I just presented to you, there's one more on the slate, which I will get to in a minute, will be automatically confirmed. But for the president nominee in 2021-22 to be president of the club in 2023-24, we are nominating Alita Williams. Alita has given yeoman's service to the club over the last many years and continues to be one of the most active members of the club. And please congratulate everyone on the slate. And we look forward to them stepping up to lead the club beginning in July of 2021.
Thank you very much, Marshall. I think
Eric, before we move on, I have one other item of business. Usually we celebrate member successes near the end of the meeting, but we have a member success that isn't on the agenda that I wanted to share with you. Eric Kempel, our current president, recently received a Chicago Engineers Foundation Distinguished Alumni Award for his service to the Chicago Engineers Foundation. And for those of you who don't know Eric, he received a CEF scholarship when he was in school. He went on to become not only a well-respected civil engineer in the transportation sector in the city of Chicago and nationwide, but he went on to give really incredible service to the Chicago Engineers Foundation, giving back to what he had been given as a student. He served on its board for many years and also served as its president. He did for CEF what he's doing for this club. He created an atmosphere of strategic thinking on the part of the club, and I want everyone to congratulate Eric on this Distinguished Alumni Award.
Well, thank you very much, Marshall.
Thank you.
That was definitely not on my agenda. Tamara, we're going to have to talk about that later. Well, I'm humbled and I don't know what to say. By the way, when CEF presented me that award on my way out as president in September, I was equally as surprised because it was at a meeting where I was also chairing the meeting and was obviously also not on my agenda. So, all right, well, that's two surprises in a couple of months here. So I'm humbled and I really appreciate that. And Marshall, also thank you for that great slate of candidates. I'm confident that this club is just going to keep getting better and better every year with the great leadership that we have coming in. So congratulations to everybody who's just been nominated and everybody who will continue to serve in a leadership role for this club. Trust me, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun. Okay. Well, as long as we're in the spirit of talking about great people and great Rotarians and people who are doing a tremendous job in leadership positions, I want to shift over to our programs co-chair, David Hirsch, who's also senior VP at UBS and founder of the 21st Century Dads Foundation, and he's going to introduce our speaker for today. Mr. Hirsch, the floor is yours.
Eric, thank you. And on a lighter note, Eric, if you were serious because you still are president, you could do something about those situations. You could fire somebody. But all joking aside, it's my pleasure and my privilege to be introducing today's speaker, Ashleigh Chapman, founder and CEO of ALTUS. Ashleigh and I met at the Rotary World Peace Conference held in Ontario, California in January. It seems like a lifetime ago. We were able to actually meet face to face. But from the time I met Ashleigh, I was moved by her relentless commitment to serve those impacted by trafficking. And while I'm sure we'll learn more about ALTUS today, previously she was the CEO and president of something called AFRJ, the Alliance for Freedom, Restoration, and Justice. Prior to that, she was the co-founder of the Center for Global Justice at Regents University, where she received her law degree. She's originally from Nashville and now resides in Wyoming. Ashleigh, it's my privilege. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to share some insights about this super important issue about trafficking. And I'm hoping that during the Q&A that we'll have an opportunity to get a sense for what this means, not only on an international basis, because I know that's one of your focuses, but what's going on domestically and maybe even more locally here in Illinois and Chicago. So Ashleigh, thanks again. We look forward to your remarks.
Thank you so much, David. And thank you, Eric, for having me with you. Lovely to be with you all, to see all your faces. Wish we, of course, were in person, but happy to do it this way too. So first, I just want to say that I'm so grateful you're taking time today to really focus on this issue. I get a lot of questions, related to COVID and human trafficking. Questions like, is COVID a good thing for human trafficking? I mean, that must mean there's less trafficking going on in the world. Maybe that's something we can put to the back burner right now while we focus on other things. And the reality is, I'm very sorry to say that COVID has actually drastically increased trafficking, not just trafficking activity, but also the vulnerabilities that drive it. And I mean drastically. So, this year during the time of COVID, we've seen a 400% increase in online child sexual exploitation in this country. We're seeing rises of both labor and sex and organ trafficking globally. And so what I'm hoping to get across today is this is a timely topic. This is something that is very terrible, but I like very much to focus on how we can end it. So to really move the conversation from one of, oh my gosh, and despair to one of hope and action. And so that's really what I wanted to focus on today and share with you what, for those maybe whom trafficking is a new topic, I'll kind of pour over some of those details, but then really go from what is trafficking to how do we end it? And what do I see as Rotary's opportunity here in the US, in Chicago, globally, which I'm very excited about too. Am I able to share my screen? I think I have that capability. We'll try.
Actually, yes, you should have the ability to share your screen.
Great. So I'm going to attempt that, and you can tell me if you are able to see it.
Yes, looks good.
Okay. So as you heard, I'm a human rights lawyer, and I have been working on these issues, trafficking directly in all its forms, here in the US and all around the world, as well as the vulnerabilities that drive it for the last 20 years of my life, every single day. So this has been my life's calling since I was a kid, when I was kind of first introduced to some terrible things that were going on for vulnerable individuals when I was a child. Today, though, here's my world, and and a lot of these are resources that we're providing you. So, and I'll come back to a couple of them, but if you just want a snapshot of my day and our team's day, Steve Grissom is on this call as well from Nashville, Rotarian out of Brentwood, and he's very much entrenched in this work too. So if you have questions, you can contact us both. But today, we steward both a global nonprofit called the Alliance for Freedom, Restoration, and Justice, as well as a business for good, a benefit corporation. Both of them aimed, and that benefit corporation is called ALTUS. Both of this, the business for good and the nonprofit, are aimed at ending human trafficking. Through the Alliance, we have supported, just in the last several years, over 10,000 anti-trafficking organizations all around the globe through our global network. We have something we call the Freedom Council, which is our work to mobilize global companies and business leaders to join this cause alongside governments and nonprofits. That is also a global and national effort. We have a student council, and this is very US driven right now, but kiddos in every time zone who are just passionate about this topic want to know what it means to be a justice advocate now and in their future careers. That's our student council, which is just super fun. We have Engaged Together. That's another initiative of ours where we work with communities down to the county level to figure out where are their strengths and gaps related to human trafficking and how to come together as a community to combat this. I'll come back to that one. We also have Justice U, which is an online university that provides badges and digital certifications for everyone from the concerned citizen to the professional in the field, and just getting them that information that they need that's the most up to date, the most excellent, to help them identify, rescue, care for victims of trafficking. That's the fastest I've ever said all that. So that's our world. It keeps us hopping busy, and we have just the most amazing team. It's a national team and a global one as well. And obviously, any of us who steward anything know you can't do anything without your team. So I just want to give them a shout out, even though they're not all with us today. So let's dive in. What is human trafficking? How do we end it? How can Rotary engage? That's what I'm going to try to plow through in the next 15 minutes. I get told I talk fairly quickly, but know that this is being recorded. I'm also going to let you know where you can go to learn more about these topics. And so, and there may be a way for me to share these PowerPoints, this PowerPoint deck with you. So don't worry too much if you're not catching it all, but here we go. If you're new to human trafficking, what you need to understand is this is not a small issue. There are more slaves in our world today than ever before in our world's history. That number, by those who count it, is 40 million plus. Now, that's a grossly underrepresented number. It's grossly conservative. It does not account for the 110 million children we know are caught in bonded labor in India. It doesn't account for a lot of forms of trafficking that sometimes get hushed up because of the political agendas of any given country, right? But as far as what we can see and the people who count this, 40 million plus, and I think that's a big enough figure. The one that's even more distressing, though, is that traffickers every year are making $150 billion off the sale of men, women, and children for labor, sex, and organs. 150 billion. And if that's a hard figure to wrap your mind around, understand that in 2018, that means traffickers made more than Fortune 500's top 5 companies. That means traffickers made more off the sale of human beings in this country and everywhere else than Apple, Microsoft, Berkshire Hathaway, Wells Fargo, and other companies combined. So that is how big this topic is how big and prevalent this issue is. No nation and no community is immune. And you know, the world really woke up to human trafficking 20 years ago. Our country really woke up to its presence in our borders just 10 years ago. And so we're still fighting some myths and misconceptions around this issue. I'll kind of dive into those in a little bit of time, but the most important thing to understand is this is happening every place. I have worked cases in communities of 50 people, and obviously in urban centers globally. The other unfortunate thing is that despite thousands of activity to try to combat this, trafficking is growing at alarming rates. So for the last decade, our FBI and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children were putting out numbers like between 100,000 and 300,000 children here in the United States they believe to be in the hands of traffickers. The fact that we don't know that number is very distressing, right? But the number is just astounding. Now, Texas, about 18 months ago, the Attorney General's office came out with a report to try to understand what was the prevalence of trafficking just in their state. And that report unearthed 313,000 victims of human trafficking in Texas alone. So that's blown all the numbers out of the water that we've been running on. In other words, we're approaching potentially 1 million victims of labor and sex trafficking in the United States. So that's the sort of the state of the union. COVID-19 is greatly increasing that activity, is greatly increasing the vulnerabilities that drive it. And as we dive into those details, you'll understand why. If you're interested in understanding what that 150 billion breaks down into, it's overwhelmingly on sexual exploitation. So $99 billion is being spent annually to rape women, men, children, youth. The youngest case I worked last year was a 5-month-old in Louisiana. So after that, we're looking at forced labor and exploitation and domestic servitude. Right now, no one has a handle on the kind of monies that are being exchanged for organ trafficking. Globally, it's just such a dark issue and so very off the books that it's hard to get at, although people are working at that. So this 150 billion really represents both labor and sex trafficking by the International Labor Organization and World Economic Forum research. Globally, if you're interested in the concentration, you can see, and you can go to globalslaveryindex.org for more information, but you can kind of see where this is concentrated. Now, don't let the fact that the United States and Australia and South America being light or color give a false sense of security here. The reason those are not colored is because Global Slavery Index does not work in those countries yet to assess the prevalence. So the rest of the world would be an accurate picture. But if you want to know about the United States, here we go. This is a picture from the Polaris Project. This is a heat map of the number of hotline calls to our National Human Trafficking Hotline in 2018, latest figures. A couple things I want to tee up about this. First of all, I hope this picture helps us understand the prevalence of trafficking in nearly every community across the United States of America. This is not relegated to just urban centers, just border towns. This is every place. The other thing that you need to understand is this heat map you're seeing here represents only 41,000 phone calls to the hotline. I just shared with you that we're approaching 1 million victims in this country. So this is 41,000 of that 1 million potential calls that could be made. And hopefully we're sharing information today that will maybe even help you make some of those calls. If you want a breakdown of the way that human trafficking is taking place and the forms and the venues, you can go to this resource. It's called The Typology of Modern Slavery here in the United States. And what they've unearthed through the research from this National Human Trafficking Hotline and all of the efforts they pulled together there, and this is a federally funded effort, that there are 25 types of human trafficking going on across the United States. So I really am now going to completely come into the U.S. market here, not go out global again. So everything you're seeing here, escort services, illicit massage, outdoor solicitation, residential sex trafficking, domestic work, traveling sales crews in restaurants and food services, all of these bullet items here are forms that are verifiable, have been trafficking victims here in this country. Why is this happening? That's where my mind always goes, right? So when I'm looking at something that's a complex social problem that's creating harm for individuals, no matter who they are, my question is immediately why? What is happening that's allowing this thing to happen? And especially at this kind of scale. First thing to understand about the why is this is an issue of supply and demand. We've been spending a lot of time talking about how much traffickers are profiting from the sale of human beings. We've talked about 40 million plus souls who are being trafficked in our world today, potentially up to 1 million even in our own country. But bottom line, this wouldn't be happening if there weren't buyers, if people weren't buying or exploiting individuals for labor, sex, and organs. And for some reason, our country and every other has a hard time going after buyers. And so there's been a lot of initiatives spun up to try to really press in on that point. Many of our state laws are now saying that buyers are as culpable and criminally liable as traffickers, right? So they're trying to put teeth to the fact that if people are buying under other individuals, they are part of the whole trafficking operation. But it wasn't that long ago when I was working in cities here in the United States where a 14-year-old would be charged with prostitution. The man who bought her would be fined what he paid and let go, and the trafficker was never gone after. So even though we have laws that have teeth, both at the federal level and here in the United States, it takes a long time to start implementing those laws pervasively across our communities. In fact, this year, I did another citywide training in an urban city with law enforcement on what is human trafficking and the indicators and the protocols, and they had never received that training before, and it's 2020. So, we start the morning out with them saying, well, we might have a problem here in the city, we don't know. And by the end of the day, they're flagging case after case after case after case that they were interacting with that they just didn't realize. Part of the reason we're missing it is because we have, all of us, misconceptions about how trafficking is taking place. Misconceptions I put into about 3 buckets. Where is this happening? Who's it happening to? How is it happening? Myth number 1 is that people believe the where is relegated to only urban cities or developing countries. And the answer is, of course, it's happening in those places. But the truth is, it's happening everywhere. We're working in communities now in the middle of our country that are experiencing a massive uptick in what is called familial trafficking. So parents or grandparents or other family members who are trafficking their children to feed their drug habits due to opioid addictions and such. So it's just taking every possible form in every possible place across our country. Myth number 2 is that this is only impacting foreign nationals and young girls. And yes, it is absolutely impacting those two populations. But the truth is, it can be anyone. Grown men are trafficking victims, grown women are trafficking victims, foreign nationals and US citizens are trafficking victims, and boys as well as girls. And we have to understand that or we're missing it. We will miss seeing the victim who may be right in front of our eyes. Another myth is how. How is this happening? And we have pictures because of social media or because of movies we've seen that this is happening through abductions in chains. And so that's what we're looking for, abductions and chains in our communities to identify victims. And the truth is that this is often a process by traffickers who are building relationship with their victims. This is especially true in the United States. I was just doing an interview yesterday on how traffickers are targeting youth and children through social media and gaming apps. All our kiddos are even more online than they ever were before now, and traffickers absolutely know that and are exploiting that. So we do a lot of work to try to tell our kids to be safe on the playgrounds outside and don't talk to strangers. And then they have devices where they're welcoming a world of strangers, a world of perpetrators, including traffickers, into their bedroom every single day. And we've not equipped ourselves as parents to understand that, or our kids to stay safe. And traffickers are exploiting that vulnerability too. So it's often a process. They're often invisible chains. We call this force, fraud, and coercion. So if I feel threatened, if I feel like someone I love is going to get hurt, or I'm being coerced in some way into believing something, and then the whole thing shifts and I'm being trafficked, it doesn't always have to be chains. It doesn't always have to be violence even, although many times violence is included. And there's a lot of confusion by trafficking victims. If you ever have the opportunity to intercede in a situation, the question is never, and it's not even by law enforcement, we train on this all the time, not asking a person, are you a human trafficking victim? They sometimes have no clue what that word means. All they know is their own story. So in the Midwest, right now, children who are being rescued from sex trafficking, these are minors who are citizens of the United States, their average placement history is 10 foster care homes, 2 juvenile detention facilities, 1 regular hospitalization, and 1 psychiatric hospitalization, which means at some point they tried to kill themselves. That's their history. And then they've ended up in the hands of a trafficker. So when they're rescued, they don't know that they're part of some bigger scheme or some gang-related trafficking event or even some organized criminal syndicate. They know I was harmed in my family. I bounced around to tons of foster care homes. I ran away. I got caught in the juvenile justice system. And finally, this person came to me and said they were going to provide for me. I believed them, but then they forced me to do things to be fed or whatever it might be. And that's trafficking. Who, where, and how. So vulnerabilities and venues. So who's the most vulnerable to trafficking here in the United States? And that list is here. So runaway and homeless youth, children and youth in foster care, and definitely those aging out of foster care, especially when they don't have support systems. Individuals fleeing violence or natural disasters and fleeing to our country because of that. Individuals with disabilities. Last year, I supported a case of a 17-year-old child with Down syndrome who was being trafficked for sexual exploitation in the Midwest. Those who've already suffered other types of abuse and exploitation, definitely foreign nationals, any marginalized group, and minorities. What may be obvious here, but it is important to state, is the one thing that all of these groups have in common is they don't have people around them, good safety nets and support networks. And that's what traffickers are targeting. Traffickers are making the kind of money they're making because they're cowards and they prey on the vulnerable. They're preying on people we don't see and we're not paying attention to in our communities. And that's how they succeed. And the fact that they are more likely to get caught for trafficking drugs or weapons than they are for trafficking a child should be an absolutely unacceptable reality. But it is a reality because they're preying on people we are not paying attention to or caring for in our communities, which means that if we can come at this with a strategy that will wrap around the vulnerable in our communities, we will immediately see a significant downtick in trafficking, because traffickers won't have a market to go to pull victims out of. And so that's a big part of the strategy for communities. In venues, it's happening in cantinas and bars with domestic servitude, agriculture and factories, truck stops, events, construction, service, hospitality, and so many more. But these are sort of your concentrated areas. I also mentioned, and you see this little house, this presence of familial trafficking. And the important thing to also understand here is, just as a victim can be anyone, a perpetrator can be anyone too. A trafficker can be anyone. It could unfortunately be a parent or a grandparent. It could be a man or a woman. And so we need to keep our eyes and ears out for all of that activity going on. So what are the signs? What are the signs that you're likely to see or encounter in your daily interactions in communities? And I could spend the rest of the day unpacking these, by the way, but I'm just going to tee them up and tell you where to go to learn more. But first, one of the biggest signs is that you notice an individual doesn't have control of movement. So they're not able to come and go as they wish. They appear to be strong and able-bodied, but they've always got somebody watching them closely. They can't speak voluntarily for themselves. They don't have control of their finances. They're working with little or no pay. They don't have personal identification documents on them. They may be quite fearful and anxious. They may show signs, even physical signs, of abuse. Their stories or their communication when you're interacting with them are inconsistent and vague, or they're keeping an unusual schedule. They could even be geographically confused or unaware. They're not sure where they came from or where they're going next. They're just here in town for a minute. They can't get out of debt. And here is a big win across this country, is that any minor who is involved in commercial sex is de facto a victim of human trafficking, whether you can prove force, fraud, or coercion or not. It's important to understand these red flags are not an exhaustive list. And what you're looking for is a cluster often. So if you're seeing a couple of these things play out in a communication with someone, anecdotally, I was just spending time with family on vacation, kind of in a socially distanced setting, and I won't name the state, but it's not far from you. And I went to breakfast when they opened up the diners in town, and saw a young lady out of the corner of my eye eating breakfast by herself. Lots of red flags were going up in my mind. And so much so that as she left the restaurant, I waited outside to ask her if she was okay. And it turned out she was a labor trafficking victim in that city and had been stuck there for 2 months. And she just bawled. I mean, but, and we got her to safety that day, got her out of her situation. But I'm just trying to express that in your everyday interactions, you're running into this and you just might not know it. So the other thing I want to say is you don't have to feel the pressure of being law enforcement on this. You don't have to feel the pressure of putting the case together, getting all the details to a certain level before you'd make the call and call the national hotline or call your local law enforcement. Please don't feel that pressure. If anything seems odd, you're kind of watching a situation, you look a little longer and it still seems odd, call the police. Ask who is it that you should talk to that's been trained in human trafficking, or else call the national hotline. And here it is. You're not creating harm if you do this, and everything's okay, but you might just save lives. And so don't ever hesitate. So how do we end it? And I'm going to fly through this because I want to be very respectful of our time here. But again, you can go back and learn more. But here we are. How do you end something like this? I mean, this is a pervasive, complex, entrenched issue impacting every demographic and every community in our country and around the world. So we researched this. I researched this for years to try to figure out what are the key performance indicators of how do you end human trafficking? How do you end it in your city? How do you end it in a country? How do you end it globally? And here's everything we discovered. Has to be true and has to be happening. If you're looking at this is the roadmap for Chicago. So this is everything that has to be happening in Chicago or Illinois or this country in order to eradicate human trafficking. So we break it down by prevention, identification, rescue, restoration, and reforms. And there are subcategories to this too. What we find that happens in communities is they rush to about 3 of these things. So they learn about trafficking and they rush to build awareness. They rush to intervene, right? Rescue victims, and then they rush to provide aftercare. Those are sort of the 3 concentrated areas in every community that's trying to address trafficking. The trouble is they're leaving almost everything else undone. And when that happens, traffickers, those are gaps in your strategy that traffickers are exploiting. We can't rescue victims or help them exit their situation if we don't know how to identify them, right? Awareness is critical in prevention, but you've also got to address demand and the vulnerabilities of driving it in your city. Aftercare is so critically important to have for every demographic and type of trafficking that's going on in your city. But if you don't have reintegration also happening, you don't have a pathway for an individual to successfully exit that aftercare moment and pursue a life beyond that moment, a living wage job or education. If those pathways aren't there, they go back to the vulnerabilities of their exploitation. So all of this has to be happening in communities. And a big part of our work is to help communities rally around this. The other thing that's important is that everyone is needed. And we look at this both as sectors as well as individual professions and efforts. So churches are needed, community leaders are needed, businesses and corporations, foundations, government, nonprofits, professional associations, educators, all of it. What happens in communities is very highly concentrated on government and nonprofit, and that's too big a burden to do everything we just talked about. So how do you help all of these different sectors rally around all those different areas of need and activity? And then how do we help an individual understand how they're uniquely positioned to see this? What if they work in healthcare? Did you know that in the United States, victims of trafficking present themselves to healthcare environments between 15 and 18 times before they're identified? And this is happening across our country. So if you're in healthcare, you need to know, how am I likely to interact with this? And then where would I go to exercise a protocol and learn more? If you travel, if you're part of a civic club, if you volunteer, if you have a business that's open to the public, where victims or traffickers might be coming in and out of your doors, educators, parents, businesses, etc. And keeping in mind that any effective strategy to end trafficking has to address the vulnerabilities that are driving it in your city. And that differs from every city. In Kansas, for instance, where you'd think that trafficking takes almost the same form across that state, absolutely not. In one city, it's driven by runaway and homeless youth, and another by foreign nationals who were coming here legally to work in their factories and were being exploited. So those are 2 very different vulnerable populations, 2 different strategies. All right, so that's how you end it. And hopefully, maybe you understand why I am so excited about the potential that Rotary has to engage this. My first introduction to Rotary was years ago in Atlanta. And I went to a club there. And by way of Dave McCleary, whom you may know, he's really spearheading a lot of Rotary's anti-trafficking efforts. And I went to his club. And here in this room, virtually today, right? You have leaders across all of your communities. You have law enforcement sitting there, and your principals of your schools, and your business owners, and your pastors and other houses of worship, all the leadership there. You've got this conglomerate of all the people that it does take to help end human trafficking. It's just, for me, just the most amazing kind of moment, right? Where if you could disseminate this information in those settings, in those natural ways that you are already there, the best way I know how to say it is, you are so incredibly uniquely positioned as Rotarians to combat this issue. It's really not whether you can, it's just how you do it. And these kinds of frameworks, and I'm closing in here so we can do some questions, but think about, you've got to understand the strategy. We talked just a bit about that. What are the possibilities? What's working great in other communities? What's not? What landmines not to step on? What's your local context? Who is being trafficked in your city? What is available in your city already? So many local context questions, and then you engage. And when you engage, you have 3 options. And this is true for every club, every Rotary club. How do you enhance your existing efforts to combat this? How would you come alongside others in your communities that are already doing it well? Or if there's a gap in your city, and there are so many gaps in this effort in cities, how might your club fill that gap? And The good thing is that's a journey you don't have to take alone, right? So we've created tons of resources for people and clubs like yours and individuals like Engage Together. We've got tons of toolkits and information. We took the Google out of it. That's what Engage Together is about. So you can go into this environment and pull everything you can think of, massive online libraries of resources and information. We have Justice U, and that's all about driving awareness and strategy, walking a person through 3 online courses on how to be a community advocate. My dream would be that every Rotary Club that cares about this issue would have at least one person who's driving that in their community go through this series, because it's a choose your own adventure series. It walks you through what's trafficking, how do you end it in your city, and what can your club do? And it walks you through all of those steps to a strategic action plan on the other side. Okay, resources for further learning. I've got a bunch here that you can go to. We've got badges, as I shared, for both just the concerned citizen on Justice U and healthcare right now. We're trying to get this out to every HCP in the country who has an opportunity to engage with victims. So if you're saying, well, what's the first step, Ashleigh? What's the first thing I should do? I'm so passionate about this. I want to know how to help. The first thing you've got to do is learn. You've got to take time to learn. So go earn your badge. Go take an hour, dive into this very interactive course online. We are working to get Justice U. We have a plan in place to get 1 million people in the United States trained through Justice U. And that's why we launched our company, to go after impact investors to help us scale this. And so that's what Steve and I are working on right now. We're trying to go from 3,000, that's how many learners we have right now, to 1 million in 3 years and get this information out there. If you want to connect with me after, here's some information on our socials and my email, and I'll stop for questions.
Well, Ashleigh, this is David Hirsch. I'm even more blown away today than I was when I first learned about the work that you're doing. And thank you for that very comprehensive presentation. I so admire your energy and what I think of your relentlessness. And I mean relentlessness in a very positive way to attract an issue that, I don't think is arguable, right? Who's going to show up at the Daily Center and say, we're for human trafficking, right? Arrest us. So I've got so many questions. I'll just ask. I love your idea about having a person in each Rotary Club who would be committed and be what I think of as point of contact to go through the training and be engaged, right? So while it's all of our responsibilities, I think it would be too much to ask that each Rotarian go through the training. So I think that approach of having one person per club or more, if they were more interested, is a brilliant strategy. So I guess the question I have is, who would be the local point of contact, not within your organization, but here in the city of Chicago, if we wanted to sort of tap into our local resources, so we're not starting fresh from your presentation and the energy and enthusiasm that you bring, but who can we connect with already on the ground here in the city of Chicago to make sure that our efforts are getting dovetailed into the already existing commitment?
Yeah, great question. So the first thing I would suggest is that you contact your local task force, your anti-trafficking task force. I can help find this information for you, but you can find it too. Sometimes these sit in your attorney general's offices. Sometimes they sit locally in your sheriff's department or something like that. They're going to know what are the present needs, right? They can really drive it home to that localized Chicago area. Part of the training we do through this series, though, is we show whoever that advocate is, who's just super passionate, ready to go, how to do a thorough community assessment of like your city and the steps you take to do that. Now, when our team comes in and does it for a city, we call this the Engage Together project. We're doing it right now for the entire state of Wyoming. Memphis is a bi-state city, and in Indiana. We can unearth positively every single data point, and we run through our technology tools. But there's an old school way to do this. So if a person who's an advocate in your club just takes that training, you'll have all of the resources to discern what's a comprehensive community assessment. Because your task force, while they're going to provide critical information, they may not know every nonprofit working on this or every other type of effort going on that you may be able to support. but they'll have a pretty good handle on the situation and give you some guidance.
Well, my parting comment is to emphasize why I think this is important. My issue, while it's not human trafficking, has to do with the breakdown of the family and father absence in society. And one of the things that you emphasize is that those who are most vulnerable don't have that family support, don't have those safety nets in place. So it's very clear to me that our issues, if I can call them that, are overlapping.
Absolutely.
Right? So when parents aren't involved, when fathers aren't involved, it creates this vulnerable environment for their sons and daughters. So again, I applaud you for the work you're doing. Thank you again for your very stimulating and enlightening presentation. And I'm going to turn it back to Eric, who after all is in charge of the meeting.
Ostensibly. Thank you. Thank you, David. Ashleigh, your passion is incredible. And I learned so much more about this topic today than I'd ever learned in the past. You're absolutely right that I think there's many stereotypes out there. We have many preconceived images about what is meant when somebody says human trafficking. And I think you kind of blew those out of the water today. One of the questions that I have, and by the way, if anybody else has any questions, please do put them in the chat box. But one of the questions that I had, speaking of stereotypes being blown away, goes back to a list you showed in your presentation of, I believe, 25 different categories. I mean, there were roughly sort of 25 different job sectors, if you will. And, you know, the ones that tend to be criminal activity were the ones, of course, not surprising, but things like, being like the lumber industry or hotel industry, those that really surprised me. And I'm wondering if you can touch on that a little bit, because I almost can't even imagine how those two things intersect, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm just on my other screen here pulling up that list to kind of lean in there. So how it happens is, if we're talking about labor trafficking here in the United States, this is going to be predominantly your foreign national population, right? So, but again, don't stereotype. These are not people who necessarily came here illegally. In fact, of the victims who have been rescued in the last couple of years, overwhelming majority of them came to the United States legally. And it's actually our law on how that works that is creating the vulnerability. So when a person from overseas comes to the United States for a job and goes through legal channels, part of that visa says that unless you stay tied to that employer for the duration of your time here in the United States, you will be deported. And that gives employers who want to abuse that situation, abuse that individual, never pay them, or pay them well below a living wage, that gives them all the power, to do that. And it creates a situation where those individuals feel like they have no power, right? So if they raise a flag, they'll get kicked out of the country, or at least that's what they believe. Now, we also have U visas and T visas in place federally to protect individuals like this. But if no one in your community knows how to leverage those or is speaking that, a big part of what we train for foreign national populations who are legally in the United States trying to work in these industries, lumber or meatpacking factories or all these different industries, oil, helping them understand just what their rights are. Just having making sure they understand what their rights are and where to go for help if that's being abused. But take traveling sales crews. So these are runaway and homeless youth who are being used by traffickers to go knock on your door and just sell magazines or sell other kinds of goods. And you think it's just a cute young kid, who's there selling your magazine. But what he has to do is go return all of that money to this trafficker, and they just get moved from city to city to city to city. And when we trained on this, even in Minneapolis, 2 weeks later, traveling sales crew, trafficking young boys who are United States citizens. So again, it happens because people are preying on vulnerabilities that are either present in a person's life for a moment, or that they just have stacking vulnerabilities in their lives too, and no one to go to for help. And they don't know. They're ignorant about their rights.
Wow. Thank you. One of the other questions that came in, and then we'll wrap up. But the question is, in the U.S., how are the police involved? Are they trained to report incidents to the human trafficking hotline, or what's the process?
I'm going to say a very lawyerly thing. It depends. It really depends. Every state, different rules. Every jurisdiction, different rules. And in my home state now of Wyoming, they passed their laws in 2013, but it's taken to 2020 to start, really training all the law enforcement on those laws, right? And this is happening in every state, right? They'll pass a set of laws and it takes time to do training. One big thing we're trying to accomplish with Justice U is to shrink the time, it takes. So it's immediately available and immediately accessible in bits of information, right? Stackable information. So that's a big part of what Justice U is about, but it just takes time. And it really depends on what they've been trained to do by their local jurisdiction.
All right. Thank you very much, Ashleigh. And I want to thank you for being with us today by sending you a small token of our appreciation, which is, there we go. Now you can see it. It's a well, that's even better.
Box. Yeah. That's
yes,
good.
exactly. Maybe you'll get it. Maybe you won't. We don't know. It's a candle, actually. And, we're all about making change in the world and having an impact. And so the proceeds from this candle, which comes from an organization called Bright Endeavors, goes towards empowering young moms by providing transitional jobs and professional skills training. So this not only helps those moms, obviously, it helps their kids and it helps the communities in which they live. So you'll be getting one of these in the mail from us. And I hope everybody gives Ashleigh a warm round of virtual applause. And Ashleigh, you're obviously welcome to hang out for as long as you want through the rest of the meeting here today.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay. So we have, obviously, that's some very sobering news about what goes on right under our noses, but we also have a lot of organizations and a lot of people doing some great stuff out there. And so I want to move on to a segment that we're calling Member Successes. And the first member success is from our member, Nellie Vasquez-Rowland from a Safe Haven. They have recently won a Chicago Innovation Award. And the specific award that they won is the 2020 COVID-19 Response Award. In partnership with the City of Chicago Department of Public Health and Rush University, a Safe Haven was able to quickly collaborate to convert a 7,000 square foot space into a fully functional hospital grade, negative air, 50 to 100 bed medical respite isolation space to serve COVID-19 diagnosed vulnerable patients. It provides a safe place to heal under the direct medical and behavioral healthcare supervision of trained professionals, and also prevents the spread of COVID-19 to others. So congratulations to Nellie and a Safe Haven yet again for all the great work that you do. I also wanted to congratulate one of our newer members, Nick Del Carlo, who has some new career accomplishments. He's joined Modus Consulting Organization as the Director of Agile Enterprise Consulting Practice. Nick was most recently an associate with Modus, providing agile coaching at US Bank, and along the way helped win a project with PayPal, which he is currently supporting. So in addition to supporting client engagements, Nick will immediately embark on defining Modus Agile Consulting service offerings. Nick brings over 15 years of IT expertise and experience with emphasis towards increasing process efficiency and business agility. Nick, congratulations on this fantastic new career move. And now I want to give our guests a moment to introduce themselves. I will go around the room here, the virtual room, according to what I have in my participant window. And if you could just briefly tell us your name, what you do, and if you are a Rotarian, just tell us what club you're with. So I'm just going to run through our participant window here. I see Catherine Pociask. I apologize if I mispronounce your name. If you could please introduce yourself, Catherine. Catherine, you may be on mute. All right, well, let's get back to Catherine. I see a Heinz Martin Frischke. Heinz, could you please introduce yourself?
Good evening, everybody. I'm greeting you from Switzerland. I have visited your club about 8 years ago. I was very happy to be with Rotary One. And I get, every week I get your messages. So I thought I want to join you here. And I thank you very much from far. I wish you all the best, everybody, and greetings from Switzerland.
Thank you so much, Heinz. Welcome to the meeting, and feel free to join us again anytime you're available. Carolyn Gale, could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Carolyn Gale. I live in northern New Jersey, right outside of New York City. I'm a corporate lawyer by practice, and I was greatly invited by Kay Fleischer. Kay and I met some years ago doing international election observations in Bosnia, and we have kept in touch over the years. Kay has told me recently a lot about what your club does, and encouraged me to join a club in my area. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to see something about what the Rotary does and Rotary's interests. This was a fascinating presentation, and I'm delighted to have been able to join you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining, and thanks for your interest. Certainly feel free to join any of our meetings. Since they're on Zoom, they're free and very accessible. So you're welcome back anytime.
Thank you.
Sure. Speaking of being welcome back anytime, Liz Goggins, welcome back. Please introduce yourself to the group.
Hi, how are you? My name is Liz Goggins. I am a member of the Rotary Club of St. Croix, Mid-Isle in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And I know this may upset some people, but it is rainy and overcast and only 79 degrees today. So I think I'm going to have to go put on a sweater. So I do want to thank you for a wonderful presentation today. I am going to sign up and take that course. And while the speaker was talking, I sent a text to one of my dear friends who happens to be the police chief, asking him if the VIPD has ever done any human trafficking training. So I will keep on him for that. So great presentation. Thanks.
Well, I'm glad that had an impact on you, Liz, and thanks for sort of spreading the word on that. And if it makes you feel any better on the weather point of things, it's actually about 72 degrees right now in Chicago, believe it or not. Although in about 12 hours, it will be 35, which is more of the Chicago that you might expect.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Well, then we'll see you again soon, I'm sure, Liz. Thanks for joining me again. Marilyn Nevy-Cruz. Marilyn, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, yes, I'm Marilyn Nevy-Cruz, and I'm a visiting Rotarian from the Rotary Club of Washington, D.C. I'm on the board of the foundation there, and professionally, I'm a criminal investigator. Catherine is also a member of our club. She's the membership chair. She stepped away for a second, but she's happy to introduce herself as well. We are trying to figure out ways to also become a hybrid club like you guys, so we wanted to check your club out, and the speaker looked really interesting too. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Marilyn. Thanks for joining, and certainly we're happy to talk offline about how some of our hybrid meetings have gone, because I think, like I said, you probably overheard me at the beginning, they've been pretty successful, the ones that we've done as hybrids. Catherine, since you're back, feel free to introduce yourself.
Hi all. Welcome to Living in an Apartment Complex and for Maintenance. Thank you so much for having me. What a wonderful speaker. We've had quite a few discussions with our club on human trafficking, and I'm just blown away by some of the statistics with that. So really looking forward to partnering with you guys and learning a little bit more. So thank you very much for having me, and it's beautiful, about 72 degrees here in DC as well.
Fantastic. It's our pleasure. Thanks for joining. Mary Beth Velzy, could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, hi. Good morning, and thank you for having me. I was invited through Jenny Wilcox, and I am not a current Rotary member. I do live in downtown Chicago, and I help individuals with retirement planning, and I also work with business owners for group benefits.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us, and
yes,
we hope to see you back again at another meeting, and maybe at some point we can talk to you more about Rotary Club of Chicago.
Sounds great.
Very good. And last but certainly not least, Irv and Ruth, could you introduce yourselves to the group?
Okay, got it. Hello to everybody. You know, our pleasure attending your meeting. So I'm past district governor right here, birthplace of Rotary. But our pleasure in attending all these meetings every week is just meeting, hearing, seeing, and listening to all the visitors that come to Chicago Rotary One. I've done this for years. I'm totally impressed every week. I hope I could continue doing this all my life. Thank you.
Me too.
Well, we hope to see you every week, Irv and Ruth. We look forward to it. So thanks so much.
Meetings are wonderful.
You know, Paul Harris is sitting right behind us. You know that, don't you?
We should have him introduce himself.
That's right.
All right. Let's hear from more people.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, guys. Are there any other guests here that I haven't called on so far? Have I missed anybody? All right. Well, not hearing anybody. I'm going to move on to some of our announcements for today because we have many as usual. And I want to start talking about some of our volunteer opportunities and some of the volunteer work that has happened. And I want to start by just sharing with you some words from Jamal Cole, who's founder of My Block, My Hood, My City. For those who are in Chicago, I'm sure you've heard of that organization. He says that the wheels of democracy turn slowly, and he ain't here to say that the election is small because it's not. However, the next morning after the election, the trash on your block still needs to be picked up. The local school council is still going to be meeting this month, and the grass in the abandoned lot still needs to be cut. So what's something simple I can do that'll have a positive impact on my block? So then the next morning after an election, when you all wake up, ask yourself those 15 words and get to it. So it's in that vein that I want to send a really nice thank you to our volunteers over the last week who helped filling hand sanitizer bottles on Wednesday and Saturday. And that would be Nick Del Carlo, Alita Williams, my wife Pilbin, Marshall Schmidt, Mark Smith, Marilyn Lopez. And I also want to thank the many friends of Rotary who came out, including those from LaSalle Street Church, who kindly hosted the events, and Yvonne Jones from the Jesse White Foundation. And why were we filling bottles of hand sanitizer? Well, because we're packing together hygiene kits for our first 5 collaborative homelessness initiative. And so we've got several volunteer opportunities coming up over this week that will wrap up this event. And first we have Thursday, which is going to be a pretty big day. That's our hygiene kit packing day. So that's taking some of the loose items like, for example, the hand sanitizer, some socks, masks, some information booklets, and stuffing them into the pre-made hygiene kits. And that'll be at the Salvation Army on 800 West Lawrence, Friday evening from 4 to 9. And then on Saturday, November 14th, we actually get to pass them out to the homeless, as well as drop off some of those kits at various other organizations that are going to pass them out over the months ahead. And so we need volunteers that day from 10:30 to 1:30, also at 800 West Lawrence, who are going to help either deliver them, hand out the hygiene kits, or help pass out some meals, because we're going to do meals too. Thank you, Alita. And then also over dinner time at 924 North Christiana, the Salvation Army Shield of Hope, 5:30 to 7:30, doing more of the same. In total, we have 2,000 hygiene kits. That is not inconsequential, plus our meals. This is going to be a huge project. We do want to make sure, as part of our strategic plan and our PR and marketing committee work, we do want to make sure that people do know about the great work that we're doing here. And so I do ask, if there are any Rotary One members out there with media contacts, do let me know, or reach out to the office. Any way that you can help promote this would be much appreciated. And in case that wasn't enough, we also have Meals for Seniors every Friday. Alita prepares meals at Maple Point Apartments for low-income seniors. That's at 150 West Maple in the Old Town area. Show up there Friday at 5:30. Do sign up through our calendar and register first. And it's fun and it's easy if you're looking for something to do on a Friday evening. Marga, are you on? Would you like to give an update for the annual campaign? Trying to see if I see you on. Actually, I do not see you on. So we will move on.
Marga had to go to another meeting.
Okay, got it. Well, the point here is that our annual campaign is going strong. If you want to continue to see projects like I just described, the homelessness initiative, Meals for Seniors, and dozens and dozens of other projects that are funded by the club or money that comes back from us through Rotary International, please do make sure to give to the Rotary One Foundation as well as the Rotary International Foundation. We want to be able to highlight our members. Obviously, you heard me earlier talk about some of the great things that our members are doing. If you have a story or an experience from within Rotary or other organizations that you think Rotarians might be interested in, we're looking for content, for social media, for the newsletter, for other venues. If you want to write up a little bit of content about some interesting things that you may have done or may be working on, please do send them my way. And we'll feature you and we'll feature your article. Other ways you can get involved, there are a million, but this is a new one, the District Environmental Committee. If you're interested in the environment, it's one of the newest Rotary areas of focus. Please do reach out to the district. You can reach out to me and we'll connect you with the right folks there if this is something you'd like to get engaged with at the district level. There's also, as always, the board and committee meetings that allow you to get engaged as well. International service, community service, PR and marketing, and the board meeting as well. There's a board meeting, for example, this afternoon at 4 p.m. Anybody is welcome to join any of those meetings and learn how business is conducted and then get engaged. Check the calendar for the latest meeting times and to sign up and get the Zoom link. If you're missing in-person fellowship, there's always the Friday roundtables. We meet at Friday around noon for an a la carte lunch at the Union League Club of Chicago. Now, obviously, the recent increase in COVID cases has complicated that a little bit, but it is still going on because we're able to take the lunches as takeout from the 4th floor dining area at the Union League Club and take them down to the 2nd floor and find a spot there. It's considered dining, not dining in the restaurant. It's a kind of takeout. So we are still meeting there and we've been having good attendance at those events. In terms of upcoming Tuesday meetings, next Tuesday, November 17th, we have Azim Khamisa, the founder of the Tariq Khamisa Foundation. Following the murder of his son in 1995, Azim Khamisa founded the Tariq Khamisa Foundation, which started a subsequent forgiveness movement that has reached millions. And then on the following Tuesday, November 24th, we have General David Petraeus, the former director of the CIA. So that should be also another fantastic meeting. We always wrap up our meeting with the 4-way test. And Liz, I think you're still on. So as an international Rotarian, from St. Croix, would you mind reciting for us the 4-way test? We will throw up the 4-way test on the screen here in just a moment, so you don't necessarily have to recite it from memory. But if you could recite for us the 4-way test of the things we think, say, or do.
Sure, I'd love to. Okay. The four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Thank you so much, Liz. Thank you, Ashleigh. Thank you, everybody, for being on today. Meeting adjourned.